Well, hello students and welcome to week 5. You are more than halfway through this class and we are going to be talking this week about the methodology and the rationale, and this is where we add more pieces to that literature review that we've already put together. I just want to give you a brief overview of how everything's going to come together after we talk about the methodology and rationale sections, but Professor Stummy's video does a really good job of explaining the methodology and I don't want to spend too much time there. So as we begin this week, I want to focus on a Bible verse that gives us this concept of putting multiple pieces together into one unit and one whole. In Ephesians 4 verse 16, Paul is talking about how the entire body of Christ comes together into one unit, but each individual unit is responsible for doing its own part. So as we talk about the methodology, which is the next portion of what we'll be doing for our research project, I want to remind you that you are proposing future research. So you're going to be using future tense verbs. And I have here on the screen a few questions for you to address as you are working through your methodology and trying to write it. Where are you going to find participants, or how are you going to create a group? Are you going to just poll a bunch of people from Facebook? How do you get that information out to them? Are you looking for a specific set of people that meet a certain criteria? Grandmothers over the age of 50 who smoke. What kind of criteria are you setting up for this group, and how are you going to capture that information? Now keep in mind, you may not need very extensive explanations when you write up your methodology, but these are all questions that you need to have answered for yourself, and that they will all need to be addressed within your actual discussion with us. After you've grabbed that group of people or that test subject, like in the sample paper that you have, the student was looking at banana cultivars, so he briefly explains where he would go to find those cultivars and how he would collect them. So after you have that collection, then we need to know, or you need to answer the question, how are you going to assess that collection or that grouping of people or products or items? Notice that in Professor Stummy's presentation for this week, he's interviewing Dr. Matt Tolles. No, that was from last week, forgive me, in the literature review section. Dr. Tolles references the variety of methodologies depending on the field of study. So most of you are dealing with things that are either going to be in the hard or soft sciences. And although a few of you are doing something more historical in nature, but you want to be mindful of how you're gathering your data, where it's going to come from, and how you're going to assess that data. If you're polling people or using questionnaires, I would expect that you would provide for us some sample questions or some sample tools that you're specifically going to use. And I will show you here in a second where I found a specific tool. Is your research going to be qualitative or quantitative, etc., etc.? And of course, how are you going to evaluate that data once you have gathered it all and assessed it? What are you looking for that's going to answer your research question? Is it a yes/no answer? Is it a certain leaning answer that says, well, it looks like people may feel this way, let's explore that further, etc., etc. So speaking of some sample tools, I found a few on a website, and I'll show you this website here. This website is called Measurement Instruments for the Social Sciences, and I ended up coming up with a specific set of tools that could be useful. But if you want to look for different tools, I would use the word measurements or instruments. This website here, specifically, as you can see here in the aims and scope area, it's a journal that is devoted to different measurements, different instruments for assessing information. Now granted, you do not have to have this information in your methodology section that you present to me. However, I want to make you aware of this information, and for those of you who are really gung-ho into your topic, you might want to actually do this type of exploring. So when I did a search, I just, up here in the search portion, I just put emotion and grading. It ended up leading me to a tool called the Satisfaction with Life scale. And when I looked up that actual scale, I was introduced then to an actual article that explains this scale in detail. I just did a Google search and actually found an academic article from Taylor and Francis Group, which we have access to through our databases at Liberty. And this explains the tool, the scale, the questions that are on this scale also, and how it's used. So skimming through articles like this can help you understand the details behind what you should consider as you are looking at your methodology section. The next thing that you're going to be doing this week is dealing with your rationale, and this is where you finally get to explain and argue for your research. In the literature review section, you were asked to just be a reporter, explain what you are finding and make connections. In the methodology section, you are expected to merely explain what research could look like, what tools would be the best ones to be used, what ideas are trying to be assessed, how would that data be collected, how would it be assessed, what would you be looking for. Here in the rationale section, you finally get to argue your point. Why is this important? What is the gap you have found? Why do people need to research this gap? And how is that going to benefit the rest of the academic community and those people who are interested in your topic? You want to also remember that in the rationale section, consider the fact that you have to make this presentation to a funding committee, maybe a grant committee, and they will give you $5,000 to perform this research. How are you going to convince them that their hard-earned money should go toward your research? So the big thing behind the rationale is your purpose. What's the big reason for this research and why is it so important? So those are the two components for this week, for week 5, the methodology and the rationale. And I don't want to stop before explaining to you more of the big picture of where we are going with this entire presentation. And this is a brief overview. We'll get into this more for week 7 when the whole project is due. But as a cursory, introductory kind of conversation, you've already done your literature review. I'm going to be grading it and giving you some feedback. This week, you are working on your methodology. I'm going to grade it, give you some feedback, along with your rationale. So those two are one document. I'll be grading them and giving you feedback. So you'll be able to see what kind of comments that I've made. You will adjust your literature review, your methodology, your rationale, and get it the best that you can. Then you're going to go back and write an introductory paragraph or paragraphs. That will be the first section of the actual paper. You'll put in then your literature review, your methodology, your rationale, and then you'll write your concluding paragraph, and that's going to tie up the entire thing. And this is going to make your entire paper. We'll talk later about the details of what makes this APA, adding in the abstract and title page and all of those things. But if you can understand these 5 components, that's going to lead you to a successful paper. So this is where we're going. You've done the hard work of the literature review, or else you are finishing it up. The methodology and the rationale section should not take as much time of a commitment as the literature review, and then putting everything together is going to be amazing, and I look forward to seeing what you all learn as you continue to join this conversation and add to the conversation for your topics.